Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Delivering remote power over data cabling, what we call Power over Ethernet today, has become the most important technology development in LAN in recent years. It allows Ethernet or IP to reach out into new application fields previously reserved for other technologies. The standardization bodies recognize the importance of PoE with the creation of new remote power categories for the LAN cabling. These new RP categories require additional efforts from installers and planners to show conformance with generic cabling standards. I'm Matthias Gerber, I'm Market Manager at RM for LAN cabling. The power of PoE increased over the past 20 years from humble beginnings at 13 watts up to remarkable 90 watts nowadays with the latest standards. When initially with PoE we used one pair to feed power into the device and another pair to return the power to the power source, we have with PoE Plus Type 2 PoE, which has increased this individual current per pair. With PoE Plus, we are now at 600 milliamps per pair. In the new 4-pair PoE applications, however, we use all 4 pairs of the cabling in order to transmit the power. So 2 pairs are used to feed power into the device, the other 2 pairs to return it. And obviously, if we just use double the amount of pairs to feed power, we can increase the overall power or double the overall power just by adding the other extra pairs. In Type 4, however, we have increased the power again up to 1 amp per pair, and this is quite a significant amount for data cabling. Now, not only the amount of power increased over time, also the usage conditions of applications changed a bit. When we had in the early days mostly devices that might use some increased power now and then, like a camera that may use extra power to zoom in or move around, but the overall average of the power was quite low. We now see applications emerging that would need the maximum power that's allowed over the whole time, so 24/7. For example, intelligent lights with PoE control would use the complete 90 watts all the time, and that is an additional change of conditions for the cabling. This slide here shows the overview on PoE requirements. The PoE wheel that we have here is actually showing the major components that we have to control to ensure 4-pair PoE. On the one side, we have the temperature increase in installation cable that we have to control in order to get attenuation of the whole link into control, because hotter cables have more attenuation. The second part we have to control is unmating on the load, spark erosion that occurs if we unplug a connection while on the load. Here we have to make sure that the damage that's caused by the spark is not affecting the quality of the connection between plug and jack. And finally, we have to make sure that the wire termination has a reliable long-term contact resistance, which is low enough not to heat up in PoE. And we at R&M actually created this PowerSafe logo to indicate products that using the much reliable IDC contacts, which give you a low resistance contact for many, many years to come. Now introducing the remote power categories. The installation standards ISO IEC, the 14763-2 and the EN 5174-2 specify new RP categories and define that these categories have to be used in order to comply to the standards. An RP category, in essence, defines the average current that's allowed in a bundle of cables. And we have 3 RP categories, 1, 2, and 3. And the RP1 allows currents up to 212 milliamps in the bundle, where the RP3 is allowing up to 500 milliamps overall. For all applications, the maximum power is defined as 500 milliamps per wire. Here we have to keep in mind, we talked before on slide 2 about the current per pair. Here we're talking about current per wire, so obviously one wire is 1/2 of a pair. And 500 milliamps here for RP3 is the same as the 1 amp that we have for 4-pair PoE. The way the RP1 was defined is at 212 milliamps is actually the level of current that is considered to be allowed without having any impact on the cabling. So up to 212 milliamps in average in a bundle is considered not to increase temperature in an extent that you would have to calculate with it and to consider it in the overall planning. The RP3, on the other hand, is obviously the maximum value that type 4 PoE is allowing and generating, and an RP3 installation is obviously then allowing all cables in a bundle to be powered with type 4 PoE. If we look at the implications of that here, we see that in the RP1, you don't have anything to do in the planning stage. So basically every cable conforming to standard is an RP1 cable. However, later on in operations, you would have to maintain and document the amount of applications that you put into a bundle. So you have to make sure every time before you plug in a device that your average power is still below 212 milliamps. On the other hand, with an RP3, you have to make the planning such a way that your installation is allowing to attach type 4 PoE on every cable. But on the other hand, during operation of the installation, you don't have to do anything anymore because it's already planned for the worst case. Overall, the RP category is a new dimension of characterization for the cabling. It is in this way similar to transmission performance categories or to fire certification, but it is independent of it. So it is completely separate from these other 2 dimensions that we have on here. So meaning it is a new thing. So you can have every combination of RP categories with existing performance cable. Now, how do we implement the RP classes? RP classes have to be used. So there is no choice in here. So the generic cabling standards require you to follow the installation standards. So you see that here in this conformance statement in one of the standards, you have to follow the installation standards. And in the installation standards, the RP categories are defined. So there is no choice. You have to follow it. One of the most obvious things that you have to do, apart from just declaring what category you are, you have to attach labels to the spaces where you can attach a PoE switch, a power source into the cabling. Meaning, in your floor distributor, you would have to add labels indicating what RP category your cabling is. And if it's RP1 or RP2, you also have to add a qualifier that you're not allowed to add PoE equipment in addition to what you have in there without calculating first that your average power is still below the level that you have agreed to. On the RP3, on the other side, obviously, you just have to mention that it's RP3 because you can attach every kind of device that you want without any further documentation or administration. The standards themselves, they behave a little bit different from each other. The EN 5173 requires you to specify what kind of RP category you have, but it's not making any mandates for a certain category. It recommends using RP3, but you can choose to have RP1 as well. On the other side, if you go for 11801, 11801 is actually require you to go for RP3, and if you're not going to that, you're not according to 11801 anymore. This table here actually shows the interrelationship between the PoE types and the RP categories. We have on the top here the different types showing the different classes of PoE which represent the different power levels that you can transmit in PoE. What we see in here, for example, for a type 2, a PoE plus, is that the individual current per wire is 300 milliamps, which equals to 600 milliamps per pair. So we have 300 milliamps, but we are only using 2 pairs out of 4 in a cable. So if we're averaging out the current to all pairs, we would end up with 212, which is exactly the value that RP1 is giving you. So RP1 is supporting PoE Plus or Type 2 PoE on all cables. So that is the consequence. However, if we go to higher types of PoE, for example the Type 4, which will give you 500 milliamps per wire or 1 amp per pair, we already using all 4 pairs, so hence the name 4 pair PoE. So the average in a cable is also 500 milliamps, which is what RP3 would allow to be used. So the RP3 is allowing you to use type 4 per PoE on all links of the installation. Now, obviously, in a bundle, you could have different applications, and there are different ways how you can do that. And the standard allows and gives you ways how to calculate for it. One way how you can do it is with this kind of tables where you have the relationship between, for example, here, a PoE plus and a type 4 per PoE. On the horizontal axis, you would have the number, the percentage of cables in the bundle with PoE plus, for example here with 2/3, 66% of the cables being used for PoE plus. And that would allow you to be still just within a RP1 environment. It would allow you to have about 6% of 4 per PoE type 4. So that means the rest of the cables, so 27% of the cables, would be without PoE, and you can't use that. But that would still be a RP1 installation, even though you have 7% or 7 out of 100 of the cables are used for type 4 installation. So obviously that's the way that how you could work it out, and there are probably installations where that would make sense to use this kind of calculation. However, typically it is not really practical. I think typically you would go for a RP3 installation and be done with it and make sure that you can attach whatever you want in the future, because yes, you have to think about 20 years into the future on what applications you would have then. R&M actually updated the PoE calculator that we had for about 10 years to the 3rd generation calculator. The calculator is just still using the same formulas in the background, but what we actually changed is the way on how you input data into the calculator. So this was aligned with the terminology of the RP standardization, so that you can input your data directly with the terminology that you know from the standards. We also made it a little bit easier to simulate your installation in here, making more possibilities for different segments, and also introducing the possibility to simulate your patch cord part of the channel. Overall, the PoE calculator gives you a way how you can manipulate and simulate your environment. And because it is an automatic spreadsheet, you can just do it easier and quicker. And one of the big benefits of the tool is that you can document whatever your planning was. And with that documentation, you can prove to your customers or to a system provider that you did a planning and what the parameters were. How we at R&M deals with the RP category is really that we introduce them into the Freenet warranty system. So from March 2022 onwards, we will have the RP categories in addition to the performance class as part of our warranty certificates. And we can do that because we would use the PoE calculator here in addition to the test data that we got anyway if we go to the warranty system, and together we can actually check whether the installation as a whole performs to a certain RP category. So basically what it means, you would have a Freenet certificate that is having the performance class and the RP category on it. RP1 is the default values. If you don't do anything with planning, you would end up with a RP1 installation. But if you do a planning for RP3 and you submit this POE calculator as documentation of your planning, we would upgrade this RP category here in the certificate from 1 to 3 or to 2 if you choose to do so. R&M clearly recommends to upgrade to RP3 completely. I mean, this is necessary for 11801 anyway, and it's really the most practical thing to do, because probably RP1 is a fallback solution. So if you don't do anything to start with, you would just, transfer responsibility to the operators later on. So either you do nothing, or if you do something, then you upgrade to RP3 directly. RP2 is kind of, you tried for RP3, but didn't quite manage to achieve it. So it's kind of something in between. So that is what I wanted to show in this short video on RP categories. There is a lot of more information on the R&M website on POE, and a whole documentation, a white paper as a download from the website available. Thank you very much for listening in. Have a good day.